there's two kinds of fiduciary duties. One is formal, one is informal. An example of formal fiduciary duty is an attorney, a real estate agent, an employee, a corporate director. It's a formal relationship where somebody is presumed and supposed to, and by law, has to take the other person's self-interest and put it ahead of their own. Now, in addition to these formal fiduciary duties, there are also informal fiduciary duties. Someone might not be an attorney, might not have any sort of legal document that says that they have a fiduciary duty, but if that person assumes fiduciary duties, if that person assumes taking care of other people's, for example, an elderly relative or something, where you're taking care of that person's relying upon you, that can create what's called an informal fiduciary duty. Now, there's a variety of remedies that can be used. An obvious one is you can get your damages back. If somebody's cheated you out of, say, $500,000, you can get that $500,000 back. Now, in addition to that, there's also the possibility for what's called fee forfeiture. This generally happens in formal fiduciary duty relationships. For example, an attorney would have to give their fee back, or a real estate agent would have to give their fee back and their commission back in an example or in a case where they did not follow through with and honor their fiduciary duty. Another example of something that can happen with a fiduciary duty is that it could be punitive, or as they're called in Texas, exemplary damages. These are damages that the law creates and that the law provides for in order to punish someone for their actions and to also discourage other people from doing them. So it's not necessarily always just a simple, straightforward matter of looking, well, you've been hurt for $500,000 or $1 million or $10,000 or whatever it might be, but there are other statutory damages that need to be evaluated in order to determine how much a particular case is worth. Now, the interesting thing about the violation of fiduciary duty from a legal standpoint is it's one of the few times in Texas law in a civil case where the burden is on the defendant to prove that they complied with a duty. Generally speaking, it's up to the plaintiff or the person that was damaged to prove their case. It's not always the case in Texas, at least, and in many other states, but certainly Texas has very strong protections in this regard, where if somebody is a self-interested fiduciary, meaning that they have some sort of involvement where they're benefiting themselves, and so just about any formal fiduciary relationship, whether it's an attorney or real estate agent, if you're getting money for being a fiduciary, you are a self-interested fiduciary, and the jury charge is going to require you to prove that you complied with your fiduciary duty. It's going to have to show that you're going to have to show as the defendant that the transactions were fair and equitable. You're also going to have to show that you made reasonable use of the beneficiary's confidence. And the third element that you're going to have to prove, which is the one that is probably the most difficult to prove, and really kind of, if you think about it, it shows how serious you need to take your fiduciary duty, if you have one, that you acted in the utmost good faith and you exercised the most scrupulous honesty. Now, what makes most scrupulous honesty more than scrupulous honesty? And what makes scrupulous honesty more scrupulous than just honesty? I don't know. But it does underline that when the jury takes a look at that jury charge, you're going to have to prove that you acted in the utmost good faith. You're going to have to prove that you exercised the most scrupulous honesty. So that's something that I would think should put anybody on notice, make you think about, if you're in a position of trust, taking care of somebody else's financial affairs or whatever, that it's a real serious thing under Texas law. So you probably should just do what's right. Make sure not only that you do what's right, but that you can prove that you did what's right. You also have to place the beneficiary's interest above your own. You can't use the advantage of your position to gain the benefit at the expense of the beneficiary. You can't place yourself in a position where the self-interest might conflict with your obligations. And even if you do all that, in addition to that, you have to prove that you fairly and fully disclosed all important information to the beneficiary consuming whatever transaction was. Fiduciary duty in Texas and other places is not something to be taken lightly. There are some very serious penalties under Texas law and the laws of various states. And if anyone has ever violated either your fiduciary duty or taken advantage of you or anyone that you know, you should definitely speak to an attorney, find out what kind of rights you have, and also what kind of deadlines there might be. Because there can be very serious, very unforgiving deadlines in cases like this. And generally speaking, if you have a case like this or anything, you need to look into it sooner rather than later, because your right to get a recovery might be lost.